All right, we got Garrett Chapman here, covers the Yellow Jackets for Georgia Tech on GoJackets.com and the 24/7 Sports Network. Big game for Miami. First ACC game, certainly a good start for Miami to the season. A lot of things going on with Georgia Tech. They're 2-3, 1-1 in the ACC, so they're getting going here. Miami's won the last two in the series. Garrett, I want to start with the offense here. Haynes King, last year, doing a lot of research and stuff with Texas A&M, Miami getting ready to play them. So learning a little bit about Haynes. He obviously didn't play in that game, but I just want to get your take on him. Obviously, it's been a good start for him. Leads ACC in passing yards and passing touchdowns. Just we're going to break down how things have gone for him, but just your overall thoughts on how Haynes has played this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me. No, he's been fantastic. He's been a revelation for this Georgia Tech offense. It was a group that struggled mightily last season, and Brinke's, well, I guess you can call it his first year, but this is his first full season as the head coach. But look, this is an offense that averaged like 17, 18, 19 points a game last year. They've jumped that up to mid 30s. So all of that comes from the ability of Haynes King to really generate some offense. He pushes the ball down the field very effectively. He generally makes very good decisions with the football. The two interceptions that he had last week against Bowling Green were a bit of an outlier. I wouldn't say those were his fault even, but look, I think he's been just like I said before, a revelation for this offense, and one of the biggest reasons why they got the win at Wake Forest and were in the football game against Ole Miss.
It just with Haynes, it seemed like just your thoughts, kind of going back to that first game. Louisville puts up the numbers there, comes out on a loss. 34 points though for the team. And giving up 39. Again, we'll get into the defense later, but. What essentially has kind of been different for him, or what has he been saying that in terms of this production? He's getting obviously the opportunities out there every week, but maybe some differences or what's enabling him to have this success individually here with the offense. Again, averaging 300 yards a game, passing offense for this team.
Yeah, it's the emergence of Eric Singleton, the wide receiver on the outside, and Malik Rutherford as well. I mean, these are two guys who they can run down the field. These are dudes who. This Georgia Tech offense in years past hasn't really had a downfield passing threat. And I don't know if that was as much to do with the quarterback or if it has as much to do with the wide receivers, but they have some speed on the outside. First play from scrimmage last week against Bowling Green was a 75-yard touchdown. Eric Singleton scored a touchdown in all 5 games. He's a true freshman too. A bit undersized, but you know what? He's a speed dude, and he's going to get down the field and make plays, and he has the ability to make some big catches. So look, I mean, at the end of the day, for Haynes King, I mean, he's smart. He has a very high level IQ. He's the son of a football coach from Texas, and he's a guy who can push the ball down the field, and he's aggressive and he's smart when he does it. I think he actually also leads the ACC in yards attempted down the field, or plays attempted down the field of long passes. So, but he doesn't do it just to do it. He's not a gunslinger who's just going to go out there and throw the football down the field just to do it. He makes the right reads and makes the right decisions with the football, and it's really put this offense in good position.
Here you touched on Eric Singleton. Earlier this week, Miami defensive coordinator Lance Guidry spoke about Haynes King, essentially the offense and what makes him go. And he said these 3 players, essentially this is what he said about the Georgia Tech offense.
I think the quarterback makes him go. There's really 3 guys on offense to me. Him, the running back, Haynes, is talented. Really fast. He used to be a wide receiver that they're putting in the backfield. So he makes a lot of people miss, and he gets out on the perimeter in the pass game, and then the wide receiver Singleton can really run. So we've got to be able to contain those 3 guys.
So you heard Lance right there noting Jamal Haynes, running back there, and then Singleton and then King. And those are the 3 guys that they're going to be essentially most attention is going to go to those 3 guys. What can you say about Haynes? And then, I know you touched on Rutherford and heard of Miami play. Cam Kitchens mentioned him too, but if you could speak on Haynes, what he's bringing to the table for that Georgia Tech offense, but also some other guys, because there's obviously going to be some other guys Miami's going to have to pay attention to here.
Yeah, lots of transfer players came in this year. Jamal Haynes, of course, he's not a transfer player, but he moved positions from wide receiver to running back this past offseason. So it kind of gives him a certain level of an added dimension, if you will. So he is part of the backfield. Dante Smith is another guy. I mean, and then you got Trey Cooley, the transfer from Louisville, who's been, generally speaking, your lead back when it comes to actually just running the football. But Haynes is a guy who's going to get out there and do a lot with the ball. They're trying to get him the ball in space because if last week was any evidence, they're trying to move quickly on offense. So whenever they get somebody out there, they're just trying to do swing passes to these guys, and they're all athletic enough to do it. Just speaking of the running backs. but
And
it is a bit of a running back by committee.
Sure. And Miami's secondary, they welcome back. They're going to get back standout safety Cam Kitchens, missed last 2 games of that head injury. So we'll see. Certainly that's going to be a big boost. I know they're speaking highly of Jaden Harris, who filled in, but it's much different with Cam in there, and especially in a game like this where they're going to pass the ball. Look, Miami's secondary, the team defense right now, 5th in the ACC in pass efficiency defense. I believe that's a good stat in terms of measuring your pass defense, because sometimes passing yardage on defense wise, there's reasons for that can kind of get out of hand, like we saw against Texas A&M. Miami's secondary gives up the over 300 yards, but they're really in control of that game. Connor Wigman wasn't effective in that game in terms of efficiency. So Miami's 5th right now. That Lance Guidry pays attention to that stat. Again, the offense for Georgia Tech, they've scored 27 in 4 of these games so far. Essentially put, Garrett, your thoughts on, can Haynes King and the offense put up points against Miami in this one?
I mean, that's going to be the key for them. I mean, if they want to stay in this football game and keep it interesting, I mean, they absolutely have to put up points. And I think that's the biggest problem for them right now is not Haynes King necessarily in the passing attack. I think that's going to go just because I think the Buster Faulkner, the offensive coordinator, he's been able to scheme them into positive situations. So at least he has to this point of the season. Now, they haven't faced a secondary quite to the level of Miami yet. So that's going to be a very interesting thing to watch. But one of the things that we've seen from Georgia Tech this season is specifically the balance that they've had on offense. And one of the biggest places that they struggled on Saturday against Bowling Green was running the ball effectively. They only had 3.2 yards per carry against Bowling Green, and that's not good, especially when you're facing a MAC team. Now you're moving back to the ACC and in a road contest, no less. You're going to have to be able to run the ball effectively. So if I want to see Georgia Tech find success on offense, I'm not going to worry about Haynes King as much as I am the rushing attack and seeing how much better they can be. 69 yards against Bowling Green is not going to cut it against Miami.
Yeah, and Miami, I think it's really interesting, and they've done a good job so far stopping the run, and Miami's really been in control of these games. They got down 10-0 against A&M, but bounced back. That was really the only adversity they really faced this season. So it's going to be interesting coming off the bye week, playing at home, and certainly a lot to play for, a lot of areas playing well, but again, the level of opponent. But Garrett, one thing that stands out I want to get into this one. You keep touching on the Wake Forest game. Look, they go at Wake Forest, they get that comfortable 30-16 win, road conference win. What do you think that can do for maybe Georgia Tech going into this one? Again, playing on the road in a conference game, they have had success recently. Anything that you could maybe from that game that they feel like they could take away or something in that, or essentially how big was that for them maybe for this one to help prepare them?
It's huge game. I mean, that was one of those situations where the offense wasn't working at the highest of levels that we've seen from them earlier in the season. It was really the defense that stole the show in that game. Of course, we had the recent changes at defensive coordinator here over at Georgia Tech, and I'm sure we'll get into that here in a second, but they had 8 sacks and 11 tackles for loss in that game. That was by far and away their biggest performance of the season. I mean, going into that game, they had 1 sack on the season, and they finished that day with 4. Well, Kyle Kennard himself had 4, and then the defense as a whole had 8. So proving to yourself that you can go on the road and get a big ACC win. And look, this is a Georgia Tech team that did this last year when Brent Key took over for Jeff Collins. They go on the road and they get a win at Pitt. They go on the road and they get a win at Virginia Tech. They go on the road and get a win at North Carolina. So this is something that Brent Key has prided himself on, is going on the road in the ACC and getting wins. So it doesn't really matter who they're playing. I'm going to give them at least a puncher's chance with Brent Key. It's just been more of the same with him as head coach, especially in these road contests.
So certainly offense has done some things and some positive things defensively. And Garrett, that's really the storyline in Atlanta there with Georgia Tech with what happened. It's a very interesting situation. I'm going to read the quote here from Brent Key. So what they did was Kevin Sherr gets moved up from linebackers, going to handle the defensive coordinator responsibilities. And then Andrew Thacker's going back to coaching just safety. So interesting situation. But here's Brent Key on the reason why. It essentially came a day after that Bowling Green loss. He said, "Our performance on defense this season hasn't met the standard that we expect at Georgia Tech. While the responsibility for that does not fall on any one individual, in fact, as a head coach, that responsibility begins with me. I do feel that a new voice and perspective from the coordinator role is necessary for us to improve. Coach Sherr is a veteran coach that has had great success in all aspects of coaching defense and at the highest levels of football. I'm confident in his ability to lead our defense and achieve the improvement that we expect and demand." Kind of just, Garrett, your reaction either to what coach had to say, maybe how things have kind of fallen in place since then, since the announcement. Certainly some adversity that they're facing right now. And Miami, look, Miami players have said that they're looking back at kind of all things. When coach was there as defensive coordinator at Tennessee a few years ago, they're looking at that, but also too, they don't really know if it's going to be drastic changes or if it's going to be kind of more of the same. How much can you really change in a week? But what to expect? What do you expect from a new defensive coordinator there?
I think it's just a new voice. I mean, at this point, that was the biggest thing. You had to make a decision and make a change of some kind after the performance that they had against Bowling Green, because ultimately the loss was unacceptable, and it was just a failure to make adjustments to what Bowling Green was trying to do. They had a strong power rushing attack, and Connor Bazelak, who's a former Missouri and Indiana quarterback who has Power 5 experience. But at the same time, it's like you really don't have any excuse to lose a football game in that way. Surrendering 38 unanswered points, something had to happen. And I think Thacker was just the scapegoat, if you will. It's not that this is a bad Georgia Tech defense, but they have played poorly. So I guess the proof is in the pudding. Look, this is a group that averages 30.8 points per game allowed, which is 105th in FBS right now. But most concerning is the inability to stop the run. That comes with tackling. Tackling's been an issue going back to Louisville in week 1. The reason Louisville was able to get back in that football game and eventually win the game is because of open field tackling. It was a big problem for them, and it continued on throughout the season. They've allowed 224 yards per game, which is the worst mark in Power 5. It's the third worst in all of college football. That's 5.3 yards per carry. And look, at the end of the day, if you cannot stop the run, you're not going to have a lot of success on defense in college football.
Yeah, and just another stat, 12 rushing touchdowns allowed, second worst in the ACC. The numbers are not good. Rush deep. What's essentially, you touched on the tackling, and maybe that is the answer, but what really has been the problem? And obviously Miami's coming into this one. They're going to look at those numbers. They're going to look at their own identity. Mm-hmm. They're going to want to run the ball regardless of the opponent, but Miami wants to run the ball, even though they've got the passing game kind of on point at this moment, but they want to run the ball. But what's essentially not been working for Georgia Tech's defense, and are there signs of maybe coming out of it at all? Have there been glimpses either in games or anything in particular that you can say, maybe point to maybe something could be a little bit better for them?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, we've seen glimpses of what they can be. They have enough talent at the top level, so really the biggest issues come just when it gets to depth. And that just comes with the new coaching staff. You're trying to reestablish yourself and just build the recruiting. And that takes time. And I didn't expect to see that year one. But that said, the secondary is pretty good. They can hang their hat on the secondary, but you saw the flash against Wake Forest. You saw how good they can be if they can actually pin their ears back and get after the quarterback. They hadn't really had a lot of a chance to do that. I mean, South Carolina State was their only other win this season. And look, that's an FCS team who wants to run the ball. That's effectively an option offense. So you're not going to have many opportunities to pin your ears back and go after the quarterback. So they've really had one opportunity to do that this season, and they flashed given that opportunity against Wake Forest, a pretty good offense generally year in, year out under Clawson. So look, I think that there are some tools in place, and Kevin Scherer, I think, is going to bring a new needed voice to the locker room, and maybe we see a bit of a rebound, because I mean, like, this is something that happens when you get a new coach, a new voice in the locker room. I know you see it in the NFL, you see it in college football, you see it at pretty much all levels. If you have a new head coach in there, sometimes that new voice is just the shot in the arm you need. So I think the talent's there. Paul Mwala is a leader in that locker room. He's a middle linebacker transfer from Idaho. He's a dude who spoke about that and just rallying up, making good tackles, and just wrapping guys up. And maybe if they can do that this weekend effectively, they can give themselves a chance.
You touched on new voice. We're talking a lot about that. Miami obviously has had their new voices on both sides of the ball. Both coordinators are new this year. The new voice, a lot of the same players. There are some new guys in there, obviously making keys there. But yeah, Miami's kind of going through that right now. When you're talking about the pass rush and things like that, Miami's offensive line has done such a good job so far, and the numbers have played out well for Tyler Van Dyke when he's kept clean. According to Pro Football Focus, he's even more effective. Obviously, that makes sense, but that's been such a big point in Miami's passing game. So I think it sounds like that'll certainly be a key for Georgia Tech if they can kind of get some pass rush. I touched on not a lot of adversity in terms of for Miami this year, other than A&M down 10-0, but one thing that I find interesting, they've scored in every quarter this season. And I think maybe if they have a quarter, whenever that might pop up, it'll be interesting because that might be some adversity. If things aren't quite clicking or coming off the bye, maybe they're a little bit rusty. Who knows? But obviously, if Miami plays the way they've been playing, they should be fine in this one. But with Georgia Tech's defense, can you touch on maybe some areas where they could, I know that maybe it is a pass rush, but maybe some areas where they could possibly excel in, or, maybe the pass defense, or maybe some guys to watch for them to play well. What do you think, Garrett?
Well, I think Miami does have the best safety duo in the ACC, but if you're going to look at the second best, Georgia Tech might have it. Clayton Powell-Lee he was a true freshman honorable mention for All-American. LaMiles Brooks is probably the leader of this team just in general. He's the free safety. And then Jalen King against Wake Forest had 2 interceptions, and he was one of the big reasons they won that football game. I will say the safety group is very strong. The secondary as a whole, Miles Sims is another great person to know. The cornerback, he's another team leader. He missed the first week against Louisville. I mean, look, and that's one of the other things that a lot of people don't realize is that first game against Louisville, they didn't have LaMiles Brooks for that second half, and they didn't have Miles Sims at all in that game. And when you saw Jack Plummer was able to find success, it was when those guys went down, and they weren't in that room. Got an EAS test, excuse me. A little alert on my phone. Excuse me.
Yeah, I got mine too. It was loud for everybody here.
That was quite loud. I apologize. But look, this was one of the biggest things that the team was able to do. It's like play good defense, and that starts with their secondary. Linebackers is a position who I want to see a little bit more from. It's a group that they added a lot. They lost their 2 leaders of the defense last year. Their 2 leading tacklers off to the NFL. So. Or I guess at least to graduation. But I want to see that group play a little bit better this week. That's a group that I got my eyes on in particular. Kevin Shearer is the linebackers coach. That's what he did before he was defensive coordinator. So I'm looking at that group in particular this week.
Yeah, and again, just Miami coming off the bye week, you've got extra time to prepare. I know they're really, doing their best to take Georgia Tech seriously, even after Georgia Tech's disappointing loss with Bowling Green. They're heavy favorites, Miami is. And, we see this all the time in college football. Miami's got North Carolina and Clemson up next. Are they going to be looking ahead? Certainly, the coaching staff is going to do everything they can to get this team focused. Miami's going to be wearing their Miami Knights uniforms. They're Saturday night, so the all-black uniforms, the guys are excited about that. So, Garrett, I appreciate
All-Blacks in Atlanta last week, man, and it was not very good.
Yeah, I saw that, and I was like, I haven't seen that one before. So, but yeah, but Miami did not play well the last time they wore these. They got hammered there, 62-26 to North Carolina. So, uniforms don't always make it, but we'll see. Guys are excited. Gary, great stuff. Great insight. Appreciate you taking the time, man, and we'll talk to you later.
Of course.